Not seen it. Perfect.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are glad you are here today. You've kind of answered this in, or a few of you have answered this in the chat, but we are just curious, like why people come to our webinars. And is it for personal use, for professional use, or a mix of both? So if you wouldn't mind answering that, that would be greatly appreciated. And it just kind of helps us as we continue to develop webinars over the course of the year, to understand who is coming and why and how to meet your needs. So we'll give you just a few more seconds to finish completing that. As well. And most of you are here for personal and professional use. So we acknowledge that. That's kind of been our most common overall, unless we specifically did it for professionals only. They're usually only here for professional use. So thank you for doing that. We are excited to have you here. My name is Samantha Roth. I'm an extension educator in Scott and Carver counties. And joining me today is Sarah Kroimans, who is in Southwest Minnesota. That's a good description, kind of where you're at, South Central,
Yeah,
Southwest,
West Central.
West
I
Central.
kind of share where
Oh,
that hump or the bump goes into South Dakota. I'm out that direction.
yeah. And she's a regional educator for us. We both focus in family finances, financial resiliency. And so today we're going to talk about what happens when costs rise. And we have done a lot of programming about adjusting to income loss. And we have a whole publication, and we'll share that link with you because there's good information in there as well. But in that information, we talk about setting spending priorities when income falls, deciding which bills to pay first to make the most of what you have, to identify the strategies for spending less, to talk with your creditors, as well as using like the old-fashioned bartering system. And when it comes to, our incomes may not have changed right now. It's not like we were in 2020 where there might have been job loss or a little bit of reduced hours due to COVID and everything shutting down. But we've all noticed that our expenses have increased. And when our income is staying the same, there's some issues. And so, there's that emotional part of it. We feel the stress. There could be the social part of it. We're not able to do as much or go out to eat with others. Our children, if we have them, may not be able to do as many activities with their friends and stuff. And then the economic issue as well. So it takes up a part of our lives. And even when, our income isn't reduced, but our spending is going up because of inflation and other things, those emotions, that social part is still being affected as well. Oftentimes when there's an income loss, I just love this graphic, our income decreases, and COVID-19 unfortunately was the perfect example for a lot of people who all of a sudden, their income was completely reduced. However, like we're all used to spending a certain amount or being able to do a certain things. And so typically when our income drops, it takes our spending, as you can see here, 3 to 4 to 5 months for us to be able to adjust our spending to match our income. Well, this time our income is staying the same. It may even go up if it's, the time for job promotions or that kind of stuff, but our spending is going up and, our income isn't adjusting to that. And so exactly, what are things we do? What are we seeing? And these are just a few, a blog post from LSS of Minnesota for strategies for cutting your gas bills, and then something from Money Watch. So sorry, shoppers, food prices are likely to keep rising. Here's why. And these are just two of, I told Sarah, there's been hundreds of different headlines. If you look at newspapers, radio, social media, television, that have been talking about everything that is rising and why it's rising and all that kind of stuff. And so it's really important to think about, like, what items have we noticed, or have you noticed a difference in costs over the past 6 months? And a few of you have mentioned, gas. Um, at the beginning of, like that's been a portion that has been really dipping into your budget, and that you've noticed a financial difference. But what other things have you been noticing a financial that has just the cost has been more than it has previously? And feel free to put that in the chat. Cars, yep, we have all talked, heard about the increasing price of cars. There's been limited amount available on lots to be able to purchase, and even, used cars have been going very hot. Groceries, the cost of food, of course, the gas, um, eggs, yeah. So specific types of food, there's definitely been a difference. And that part of it is the avian bird flu coming in too, that, just the production of eggs, of chickens is down. Formula and diapers, definitely as well. Trash collection, yeah, that's a one I hadn't thought about. Yeah, their gas has gone up, so I'm sure they've raised their prices to be able to, adjust so that they're still making a profit. Clothes as well. Katie shared they fix cars that are old because of the price of cars. Right, but even those repairs might be more just to be able to get parts for that vehicle as well. So yeah, absolutely. Recycling, raw meat, yep. Yep. So all of those things are, there's just been a lot of things that have shifted. Amber, rent, yeah, my rent went up too this year. And I mean, I understand my landlords also have to make sure they have a cost, but it, touches everything, and utilities, especially natural gas. Yep, you are correct. So, there's just been a lot of things over the last 6 months, and sometimes it seems to ebb and flow. And maybe level out, and we all hope it levels out or something happens, I guess, is how I think of it. Something happens to make it all go back to where it can be. But it's also, like when we're thinking about, okay, so we have rising costs on our expenses. Our income isn't changing at the moment, or it might take us a little bit for our income to change. So how much money is really needed to cover those essential expenses? Have we sat down and kind of done the math to see how much it is? So we have an example here. This family has money available is $1,700, and it's for pretty basic needs: our housing, our utilities, our food, and transportation. And this month has been, or the month before was fine. They did spend $1,540 total of their available money to cover their housing, utilities, food, and transportation. And their balance, they still have $160 that to the good. So they can use that for other expenses, clothing, house maintenance, that kind of stuff. However, like most of us, they have seen their gas prices rise. And so they still only have that $1,700 available to them, and their housing stayed the same. The utilities have stayed the same because it's been nice out, so they're not using as much natural gas and they're using more electricity because their heating costs have gone down. Their food overall has stayed the same. They're using up what's in their shelving and their refrigerators and that kind of stuff, eating out less. But their transportation increased by about $250. So now they're spending $17,000 or $1,790, and they are in the red $90. So every month, if this continues, they're going to be short $90 to cover basic expenses. And I'm guessing most of us can relate to this, of noticing like that fun money or that play money or money we could set aside for savings. Maybe we're not able to do that at the moment. So it's important to think, do I need to make changes? And one of the things is to think about is, how long is this present financial situation likely to last? So we kind of talk about our increased expenses. Our spending is increasing due to inflation, rising costs of gas, rising costs of different food products, parts, all of that kind of stuff. And so this is really something that's out of our control. And, do we think this is going to last for 3 months, 6 months? But if you have other situations where you're having spending increases, is that something that's temporary? Maybe you have a medical bill that really needs to get paid, and you can do that in the next 6 months. Or is this something like right now, like, I don't think this is going to go down anytime soon, so I need to acknowledge that I have to change something because I can't change the prices that are set by others. And so when we are thinking about what do we do when things like this happen, is that we really need to, look at our budget, our spending plan, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But what are the strategies that we can do to handle our changing finances when it comes up? So one of the things to think about is there anything I can eliminate or to reduce spending on non-essentials? And this is hard for people to hear, but like streaming services or automatic subscriptions that you don't really think about, they just kind of show up and you're like, oh, this is fun. Like, could be a magazine, it could be a crafting product, it could be the clothes subscriptions, the Stitch Fix, those sorts of things, the Netflix, the Hulu, if you have multiple of those things, to eliminate or reduce. And that's going to feel hard, but it's one of those things that we really need it. Reduce spending for basic needs. So, food is an example. Are there things that we found ourselves spending more money on that maybe we can replace? So I'm thinking meat instead of eating steak, to do more hamburger. Those may not pertain to everybody, but a lower cost item or lower cost cut of meat that you can still extend as well. Revising your budget. Is there some place that you can shift to move from one place to the other? Like switching how much you eat out versus how much you buy in groceries. So increasing your grocery costs, eating out less to be able to make up that difference. Another strategy is to increase income, and this could be for a short amount of time to get over this rising costs. So if you're working one job, to maybe picking up an additional job for the spring. Right now, I'm sure places that are selling plants would love to have extra people. Those sorts of things that are opening up. So that increase in income could also be selling things off that you haven't really used. And it could also be to making the decision to use credit for the time being, if you think this is going to be a very temporary thing, and knowing that there's an added cost of using that credit as well. So obviously Sarah and I talk about finances, and so we can't talk about rising expenses or decreased income without talking about having a spending plan and what exactly is the benefits of it. So a spending plan helps families to make decisions about how to spend their money. It takes, we always talk about needs versus wants, and we want to make sure we can meet all our needs and we can have some of our wants. So our needs are basic: our transportation, our housing, our food, utilities. I think in Minnesota, or if you're in other parts, is important to stay warm. In our winters, we want to make sure that's an option. And it's just, kind of those things, that transportation, that kind of stuff that we need to have, and then be able to fulfill, some of the wants that our family has. Obviously, to focus on providing for those needs before providing the wants, and working to match our current spending, or our spending, to current income. And it also helps to prevent family arguments over money, and for everybody to have a money conversation, to know what's going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now.
Thank you, Sam. So I'm going to walk you through a few slides on how to one strategy for developing a budget or a spending plan. But I want to ask first, what's most challenging for you as you develop a spending plan, or as you're working with your clients? What's most challenging for them as they're working on that? If you can put some ideas in the chat. I'll give you a minute to think about that and type. Changing, rising prices for things. Katie, yep. So it's kind of a moving target when you're working on that spending plan or budget. Trying to plan for the rise in property taxes, right? That can be huge. Ours went up a lot a few years ago. It's hard to budget on those things, right? Trying to figure out how much to estimate.
Yep. And
Definitely.
Jen shared to, just giving up things, and like acknowledging that I do need to give up, or cutting. She's mentioned self-care, tithing, spending as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, someone shared in a private message to me that they tell me I don't have enough money to make a budget. I really think everyone can develop a budget or a spending plan. So um, we all have resources, but typically limited resources to work with. But having a plan for that, and for some of us, we might be getting assistance on housing or energy assistance or some of those things that perhaps are being paid directly to the vendor. I think it's good to see that big picture and knowing where resources are coming from and where those expenses are going. Yeah, lots of great ideas. Thank you. So when we look at developing a spending plan or a budget, and I like to use the terminology spending plan because it's a plan for where do we want our resources to go. And as we've been talking, they aren't going quite as far as they used to. But step one, identifying income. So what amount can you plan for? And we're going to look at each of these steps in a little more detail here in a minute. Step two is determining monthly expenses and setting some priorities on what needs to be paid first, and then balance that bottom line. So hopefully the ideal is to have that balanced bottom line, but oftentimes we need to make some adjustments to make that happen. So first step is identifying that income. And so again, using take home amounts. So after all the taxes and deductions are shaved off that, what amount are you taking home? Because that's what we really have to work with. And income can be a variety of things. There's several listed on the slide here. And I'm sure there's several more that you might be able to identify as well. One of the things when my kids were growing up and they all had jobs through high school, is they contributed at times when they wanted to upscale or supersize different things in their lives. Back to school shopping, I set a budget, and if they wanted to spend more, they had to cover that. Towards the end, they each got a cell phone because we live in the country and they were on the road a bit, and I wanted to be able to connect with them. So they each got a very simple cell phone, and if they wanted anything bigger and better than that, they needed to contribute. And so in our family, income involved contributions from our teenagers. So I think we need to think a little bit broader, and that's not for everyone, but to think about who's living in our home, who's benefiting, and how do we work through that? So income. All right, let's go to the next one, and that is going to be determine those monthly expenses. And so here we're really looking at wants versus needs and deciding which expenses are essential, which have the highest priority, what areas can be reduced, and how much can I really afford to spend? So how much do I have available for all of the different categories? Um, let's actually walk through these questions and have some conversation in the chat here. When you're thinking of either your personal spending plan or folks that you work with, which expenses are essential? So which are the basic needs? Let's go ahead and share some of those in the chat. Yeah, housing for sure. Thanks, Amber. Housing, utility, food, transportation, food. Yep. Housing, yep, same. Food, transportation. And oftentimes, especially the housing and the transportation, yes, Jen, the utilities to keep the lights on. Oftentimes, the housing and the transportation are pretty big commitments, right? We sign a lease perhaps for a year, or we get a mortgage, right? And we're committed to that mortgage until we sell that. Vehicles, it's really challenging to buy and sell vehicles every couple months, or to make changes there. But I find oftentimes that we can have a pretty large impact on our spending plan when we do adjust some of those bigger ticket items. I was working with a young man recently, and his housing situation shifted. He'd been renting from a friend who owned a house, and that friend ended up moving. And so this young man chose to sublet a pretty inexpensive apartment, and definitely not the quality perhaps he was shooting for. But in these uncertain times, he chose to go with really conservative housing. He's hoping to save up some money and perhaps buy if the market ever settles down a little bit. But sometimes folks are making pretty intentional decisions around some of those items. Also, I worked once with a young man whose employer actually sent him to come sit down with me and work on a budget or spending plan. His picture looked pretty conservative all around except for transportation. And I really wanted to follow him out to the parking lot after we met, because he was driving something big and shiny. And I'm sure although I knew the monthly payment was expensive, the insurance, the licensing here in Minnesota for a new big shiny vehicle was pretty high too. And when we finished, he decided he needed to downsize. And he got back to me after that and said he traded in his vehicle and got something that had a smaller payment, less insurance, to put the license tabs on it was considerably less. So oftentimes, again, those bigger decisions can have a bigger impact on our spending plan. Let's go down to that second question there. Which expenses have the highest priority? Are they the same as the essentials we just listed, or are they something different? So tell me same, and if you say different, tell me what might bubble up to be a priority that wasn't an essential. And no judgment here at all, because everyone makes their own decisions based on their individual circumstances. So are those highest priorities the same as essentials, or are they different? Okay, insurance. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. That is huge, right? And there are some basic laws about what kinds and types of insurance we need, right? Basic needs. Yeah, are those priorities? Anything else that bubbles up for folks as a priority? Oh, credit card payments. All right, so you stay current with that. I can put off new clothes, but I really can't put off the insurance and some medical care. That's yep, I understand that, Katie. So you're prioritizing things there. Any other thoughts? Sometimes I work with folks, and they may put their tithing as a priority. And they may also put that in an essential category. And no value judgments here. For some people, that really is a priority, and it is essential. For others, that I think someone mentioned earlier that can drop off for them. But oftentimes our values really influence how we spend our money. All right, third question. Which areas can be reduced? What are your go-to categories? And it might be one of those listed on the slide, or it might be something totally different. Where do you go when you want to reduce an expense? Share those thoughts in the chat.
I always have the my unwritten rule to reduce, because I always feel that, heat's been so expensive over winter that once it hits May 1st, I turn off my air conditioning and heating. So it's just, it's whatever the weather is. And, it has to get pretty darn hot and muggy before I'm willing to turn on my air conditioner. So to me, that's one of those things that, like, I've refused to reduce heat. I mean, I don't have a super hot place anyways, but May 1st is my deadline of, like, that's the last day I'll allow the heat to be on. And I've been
Yeah.
cold a few nights, but that's just one of my ways I help to reduce that.
And I'm guessing you put an extra blanket on at night too, Sam.
Yeah. Or thermals or everything.
For
So.
sure. For sure. All right. Thanks, Kathy. Groceries and utilities are where you're looking to cut. So maybe you're doing something similar to Sam, right? Turning off the lights and turning down the heat or turning up the air conditioning. Would that be up to a warmer temp so it doesn't run as often? Clothing, entertainment, eating at restaurants. Yes, Jessica. I find myself spending money at eating out, and that's one area I really try to resolve. To spend less. Annette, clothing, personal care, recreation. Thanks, Naomi. Clothing, personal care. Yep. Entertainment restaurants. Deb, yeah, those fun activities. Maybe go to a park or a free zoo. Definitely. I have some friends that love crafting and their craft rooms are pretty well stocked. So they can still enjoy some of their recreational activities without buying new items. And especially with the beautiful weather that's headed our way, hopefully it'll be easy to get outside. Yeah, Jen, that fun spending. Oh, coffee. Yep, going out to eat, reduce some on grocery spending temporarily. Kristen, yep, those charitable donations, the subscriptions for sure. Thanks for sharing those on what can be reduced. When so the last question is more of an individual one, and I won't ask you to share that in the chat, but figuring out how much can you afford to spend, and that's why the spending plan is really important. All right, so step one, we looked at the income. Step two, we're looking at those monthly expenses. And some of those we can identify pretty easily, right? By looking at our checkbook register, if you keep one of those, or looking at your online statement with your financial institution. What are you paying for those different things? But if you're not quite sure what you're spending on different things, if you're perhaps spending cash or using your debit card and getting cash, a variety of things. We encourage folks to track their expenses for a period of time, ideally a month, so you can see where money is going, or at least a week or two. Someone had mentioned coffee. So oftentimes we have some of those habits that we do consistently throughout the week or the month, and that'll give us an idea of where we're at. So then we're going to look at that step three, and that's balancing the bottom line and thinking about, are we able to cut spending? And then you identified several areas. The second bullet is often one that doesn't come up right away, but are there ways to increase income? Right? So it might be picking up some extra hours at work, or working overtime, or picking up a part-time job to help cover some of those expenses. My back in the spring of 2020, when COVID hit, my husband and I built a little shed out back, and I have laying hens, and right now I'm actually selling eggs, and not that I guess I'm benefiting from the avian flu with the high egg costs, right? But eggs are in demand, so I've got customers right now, so I'm able to get enough to cover feed, so I'm really not making much. But are there things that you have or that you do that you might be able to increase your income? Sam, that's a great idea. Sam suggested in the chat to ask for a raise, right? The worst they can say is no, but I'm betting most of you are really good employees and you do a darn good job at work. And there's a huge cost in training people and retaining good workers. And so asking for a raise would be great, definitely. The third bullet here is to review assets. So what do you have that could be used, right? And so my chickens are an asset, right? They're laying eggs and I can sell my eggs. I'm not going to get rich doing that, but those 14 girls are doing pretty good. But are there other things that we could do? Do we have things? Do we have skills that could be used to make money? Deb shared that where she works, asking for a raise is not an option. Oh, that's really sad. I'm sorry to hear that, Deb. Really, really tough. So reviewing assets again, do you have things that are sitting around that you don't use? Maybe you could, she works for the state. Okay, thanks, Deb. Are there things laying around that you don't use that you might be able to sell? We're getting into prime rummage sale season. Definitely that takes some work to get a rummage sale together, but definitely you might be able to raise some dollars or use the online um, sale sites, the rummage sale, garage sale sites, some of those to see if you could get rid of some things. That would be good. Um, definitely. All right, we're going to go to the next slide here. So sizing up the situation, and Sam talked a little bit about this earlier, on how long will the present financial situation last? And there are some unknowns for sure, right? We don't know how long the avian flu is going to last. We don't know how long the economy is going to be challenging. And so we just do the best that we can in estimating that. Again, thinking about how much income can we count on, how much money is needed to cover those essential monthly expenses, and that would be revealed through the spending plans that we develop. We also need to look at the debt side. So how many creditors are owed and what is the total amount? So spending some time listing out all of those debts. Do you have a mortgage? Do you have a car payment? Do you have credit cards? Do you have payday or car title loans? Are there loans from family or friends? Are there medical debts? Are there bills that are past due? That would be added to that list. Are there outstanding, did I say car repair bills? So having a total list of what those things are so that you can tackle those. And we'll be looking at a PowerPay feature in a few slides here that can help us address some of those debts as well. We talked earlier about what assets could be used to pay off debts, selling some things, getting rid of some things. Thinking about what debts are most important to repay first. I know earlier in the chat, someone had indicated that credit card bills were one of their priorities or their essentials. But let's use the chat feature again here. And when you think about the clients you work with or your situation personally, which debts are most important for you to repay first? You want to make sure they get paid in full every month. Student loans, you stay current with those. Now, Sam, help me out. Did the student loan pause that ended or soon?
I think it was extended to
Okay,
August.
so
But and if it wasn't, or if it was, it sounds like that'll be it.
okay. All right. So some student loans maybe didn't fit in there, but definitely when we need to be paying on those credit cards, yeah, mortgage and transportation, right? Keep a roof over your head, and transportation probably gets people to work for sure. Yeah, those essential bills, housing, food, utilities, right? So I'm seeing a lot of similar things. So looking at those types of debts that need to get paid first. The last item on this slide is what debts could be satisfied by surrendering or giving back the item. Now that's interesting to think about, right? And that might connect with someone's pride, values, not always easy. I've had families that I work with that have bought furniture on a loan through the furniture store. And oftentimes they get a pretty good, 0% interest for so many months. So they're not paying interest on that, but they still have that monthly bill. And if dollars are really short, and I've had some families who have chosen to forfeit that furniture or let it go back. So that is an option, probably not one that we would jump to start with, but thinking about that as an option. All right, going to go to the next slide here. All right. So what will affect your family's health and security most? So when we're thinking about, again, those increased expenses, what impacts our health and security? And I'm guessing you're going to put in the chat for me, hopefully, some of those same sorts of things. But what are some of those big ones?
With this one of the things that came to mind is like medical insurance, or being able to make, if you wear glasses or have prescriptions that are monthly. And we haven't really talked about those sorts of things either. But when you said that health and security, health wise, I
Yeah.
want to make sure, I can meet prescriptions and that kind of stuff too.
Right, right. So if your son is getting really sick, right, that's important. Stress, loss of income, loss of health coverage, right? Those things are really impacting families. Question from Naomi. Is it better to pay the full amount and barely scrape by, or just pay the minimum amount? Um, it could be and both, right? Everyone's situation is a little bit different. We encourage at ideally, you're paying at least the minimum, right? On, let's say, a credit card bill or a car payment or whatever. Most of us are not in a situation where we can pay extra on car payments or mortgages, but we're making those payments. But let's say we're talking about a credit card, and should we try to pay that off in full, or should we just pay the minimum? We have to look at that big budget, right? Or that spending plan. If I pay just the minimum, is there money to put groceries on the table? Or if I try to pay extra, right? Are we going to be able to put food on the table, or could we access a food shelf for a few months to supplement the food budget, right? So thinking outside of the box, and maybe that's not even outside of the box anymore, to be thinking about some community resources that can supplement. Um, so definitely, Naomi, on a individual basis, solution strategies are definitely going to look different, for sure. Um, and when we think about debts, they are legal obligations. Um, and you might consider an option. One option after you've contacted creditors might be to divide the money available and pay each creditor a share of the amount owed, um, to to reduce debt a little bit. Amber, I think you're right. Therapy, COVID, I think, has really elevated the awareness and the acceptance of talking about mental well-being and empowering people to reach out and get the help that they need. And if that's receiving professional help therapy, I'm a cheerleader for that. So definitely figuring some of that out. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So we had talked a little bit earlier about the importance of having conversations with family members, and involving people. And we really find that family members are much more willing to accept and support decisions if first they understand the tough choices that must be made, and if they have a voice in making those decisions. So definitely, an individual would have a different conversation with a 5-year-old than they would with a 15-year-old. So it needs to be age appropriate, and we don't want to unload family financial stress on children. But I think it's okay for them to understand that, we're not going out for pizza and a movie every week, because instead we need to buy food for the table, and we've got other obligations and responsibilities, and maybe even just a conversation as, as you drive by the gas station, to help folks realize, or help the young ones realize, wow, gas went up 5 cents over last week, or it's gone down. But to help them realize that there's fluctuating costs, and we need to be adaptable and plan for that. I really like Sam put the slide together, but the talk, listen, involve, and support is so important. Those are great skills within a family when we're talking so many different things, but when we're talking finances, it's really key. All right. So we also want to look just a little bit further about what are the consequences, right? What might we lose if bills aren't paid? Um, when we're talking secured loans where there's collateral, right? So if I don't pay my mortgage, I'm going to lose my home eventually. If I don't pay my vehicle, they're going to come take that. Furniture loans, appliances, recreational vehicles. Are there other items that you've seen or heard folks purchasing or using a secured loan? Go ahead and add those to the chat. Oh, storage fees. Oh, so if you don't pay, that would make sense, right? Hence, they have a TV show on that. So if you don't pay your storage fees, you're going to lose all of your stuff in there. Some of the people I work with are curious or interested in home equity loans. So I do some financial counseling a couple times a month with gamblers on a residential treatment program. And you can imagine some of the gamblers have accumulated a considerable amount of debt, lots of times credit cards and loans from financial institutions or loans from online institutions that I think are a little questionable, loans from family and friends. And so one of the things they think about and consider is, should I take out a home equity loan and pay all of that stuff off? And then I'll just have one payment instead of maybe 6 credit cards and 3 loans and a variety of things. Well, and my response is always, well, it depends, right? Let's talk about the pros and cons. And one of the consequences, if I shift that unsecured debt, the credit cards and those other loans that do not have collateral, into a home equity loan, I'm shifting that to a secured loan. So then if I lose my job or my hours are cut or I get sick and I'm not able to make that payment, I'm putting my house at in jeopardy. So I really caution folks to be careful about shifting unsecured debt to secured debt. All right. How much do you still owe on the debt? So we talked earlier about coming up with that list. Have that complete list of loans. What is the current balance? What's the monthly payment? What is the interest rate? What is the status? Are you current? Are you past due? Is it gone to collection? So oftentimes it can be scary for folks to come up with that whole list of debts. But as I work with folks, many of them say at the end, oh, that wasn't quite as bad as I thought it would be. I knew I had a lot of debt and it was where I thought it was going to be or in the neighborhood, but just knowing, right, what is the challenge? And so naming it and that allows people to identify strategies. And so we encourage folks to consider these are options. So they might consider paying off the low balance loan first. And for those of us that are motivated by having success, and I think most of us might fit in that category, paying those low balance loans first is great, right? So then we can knock some of them off the list. So we go from 10 debts to 9 to 8. And then as we get those paid off, of course, we'll take the amount we've been paying on those and add it to the next lowest balance. So kind of a snowball effect. We'll be paying more as we go. Another item, and we talked about this too, is there an option to return newer items? Or can we sell items? Again, that rummage sale or online auctions. Or can we give items, forfeit those items back? So lots of options to consider. All right. So thinking about those credit card bills specifically, do you have those outstanding balances? So it's ideal to at least make those minimum monthly payments to keep the accounts current, right? You're not gonna be dinged on your credit report if you are making your minimum payment, right? You're making payments as agreed. We encourage folks to compare interest rates to ensure lowest rates. Although I have seen at times where folks will do the credit card hopping where they'll take their balance and transfer it to a 0% card for 6 months and they don't make much for payments, and then in 6 months or 5.5 months they bump it on over to the next one. That may impact your credit report. So it's not credit card hopping is not an ideal solution. The third bullet here talks about possibly destroy credit cards and close those accounts. So to avoid the temptation to accumulate additional debt. Although when times are tough, it is nice to have access to credit if it is needed. And if there is an emergency, that could help us address that. All right, so here's the promised Power Pay. And so this is a great calculator. Sam, I can never remember. Is it our Utah? Yes,
Yes,
thanks. She's
Utah
shaking
State.
her head. Yes. Our cooperative extension counterparts in Utah developed this online calculator, and it's just wonderful. And so you go onto the calculator and you put in your information. So you put in the balance, the monthly payment you plan to make, um, the interest rate, and it'll figure out for you, so on this first, on the left hand side, we have two debts, and I'm going to assume they're credit card debts and actually pretty low APRs on those. So the first one's $1,500. We're making a monthly payment of $25. It's 14.9% APR. So we have 111 payments left on that. The second debt is $4,500. We're making $150 payments each month, 9.9% interest. And so we have 35 payments left on that one. And so you can see then the interest paid on each of those if we're making I'm assuming these are minimum payments here. All right. But over on the right hand side, we have a couple options that the Power Pay can run for us. So if we try to Power Pay on the highest interest rate, what does that look like? Okay, so we'd have Power Pay savings of $612. And actually, in this situation, we have Power Pay savings is the same for each option. So it's almost like go ahead and tackle it, whatever gives you the best, the greatest satisfaction. Or you can look at the lowest balance, or some people may choose to go with the shortest term loan and really Power Pay on that. And so if folks are able to identify extra money in their spending plan, for example, if they were to cancel a subscription service of some sort, whether it's for clothing or meals or television, movies, maybe they decide to cancel one or two of those and come up with $30 a month to use as they Power Pay on debts. Then folks can really see how quickly or how that can speed up the repayment. So powerpay.org, pretty simple calculator to use, and it's very visual, which is helpful for many of us, and it does the math for us too, right? So we don't have to think too hard about that. All right, so we've referenced credit scores a few times here, but we know that late payments and non-payments of bills are recorded on a credit report. And so that's going to impact our scores as well. So we want to make sure, if possible, that we're making payments on time right, as agreed. And one of those nasty little fees that always shows up is if I'm paying late, or if I'm over the limit. There's a variety of fees, but not only when we pay late does it go on our credit report, but they're going to charge me extra as well, and then I'm getting further behind. These can damage. Yep. So if you're having things that are negative items that are reported to the credit bureau, these things can damage your ability to get credit in the future, or it could increase the cost of credit. So I may still qualify for that next car loan when I need to get a different car, but chances are the terms of that loan, the interest rates are probably going to be higher and not as attractive. We encourage folks to get a free copy of their credit report, annualcreditreport.com. This is the one and only government approved free credit report site. And so folks can get a free report from each of the three main credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And so you can get a free report from each of those each year. Some folks choose to stagger that throughout the year. So maybe get one now, get one 4 months from now, and get the third one 4 months from then. And then it's a new year and we can start over. Now, Sam, you always keep track of this for me, but during COVID, folks were able to get a credit report weekly. And I don't know who would want to look at their report weekly, but is that still in effect or is that faded off now?
No, that ended in April.
Thank you. So just a few weeks ago.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. But we encourage folks to check out those credit reports so that they know what's out there and what's happening for sure. All righty. Okay, so we're getting down to the end of this. Well, not totally, but yes, we're getting down to the end. So where to start? This might feel really overwhelming for you, or as you're working with clients, it might feel really overwhelming. And so we have a coworker, Lori, and she always talks about do one thing. Right? You can't do everything and it feels overwhelming, but do one thing. So maybe we can make small adjustments. And the examples here are when driving. We could drive slower. We could brake less, right? So we're not doing that jackrabbit start and stops, or we could combine trips when we're driving. Yeah, so the gasoline index rose 18.3% in March and accounted for over half of all items monthly increase, right? So some of the food index rose a bit as well, right? So thinking about how can we make small adjustments. So when we're driving, using gas, doing some of those things, or when we're thinking about food consumption, maybe we choose to eat out one time less per week or per month, however that fits into your family situation. Or maybe we decide I'm gonna start peeling my own potatoes, right? Instead of buying tater tots, for example, right? But it's gonna look different for everyone. But what's one thing that we can do? Looking for discounts. There is is this one is this an app, Sam? Gas Buddy? So it's an app that you can search for and it'll help you find the least expensive gas in the area, correct? Yep.
Yes.
I live in a rural area, so I don't have a lot of choices, but those of you that have more opportunity to shop, right? And we don't want to be driving miles and miles to get that cheapest gas either. But look for those discounts, and Gas Buddy might be one of them. Paying down debt is an option as well. And so trying to get some of those things paid off. So if our economy, if the situation starts looking worse, if we've gotten some debts paid off, hopefully we freed up some income to help cover increased gas or food prices, some of those things. We also encourage people to keep some cash savings. So sometimes folks are curious on Should I just grab everything out of my emergency fund and pay down all of my debt? I'm a little hesitant to do that. Yes, debt is costing us money with interest, but it's good to have a bit of a cushion as well with some cash savings. We typically talk about an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. For many of us, it takes a long time to accumulate that, but if there's an interruption of income, then we would have that cushion there. I see in the chat, Deb is asking for the PowerPay calculator, do we need to make an account with them? I'm not finding where the calculator is. Sam?
So their website tells you about it, but the easiest way is to use their app, which is free. And you do, I'm trying to remember if I actually put in, I don't think I had to make an account for the app.
All right.
But yeah, and it's not connected to your, it doesn't have to be connected to your account. So it's security wise, it's safe. You just type in what your information.
Yep. And I just went to the website, and so you have to set up an account. And so sign up. And once you get signed up, then you'll have a login and a passcode. So you can log in the future. And so once you get into there, then you're going to see the calculator for sure. Okay, well, we are winding down on time here. What kinds of questions do they have? What kind of questions do you have? Things that you were curious about that we didn't cover? While folks are thinking about that and typing them into the chat, I'm going to cover a few additional things. If you need a certificate of participation, we do have those available. And so we ask that you complete the evaluation, which is on this slide here. And it's a pretty brief evaluation. But one of the questions, actually the first question is, which webinar did you participate in? And so this is the one on budgeting. Yes, we will put that link in the chat. I was just grabbing that here. We are also going to send a follow-up email with a PDF of the PowerPoint slides, and we will include this link in the PowerPoint slides as well. So you can get that certificate through the evaluation. Also, 30 days after the end of this series, we are going to be sending a follow-up email, and in that will be another very brief evaluation, but it's really important for us to document if people are making behavior changes, if the information we're providing is making a difference. But watch for that email for the evaluation, of course, but the most exciting thing for you probably is in that follow-up email, there will be a playlist with links to all of the recorded webinars in this Making Sense series. So that'll be in your inbox down the road. All right, so we do have, this is our Making Sense of It All series. And so today was our May 10th. Yep, budgeting for increased living costs. There is one tonight on financing post-secondary education. We're looking at the cost of borrowing, saving and investing, credit reports and scores, and saving money when feeding your family. And I'll include links to these in the follow-up email as well. We also have webinars in Spanish. Our colleagues who are blessed with a native and a second language will be presenting those, so you can see those topics. And then we have a few related to recovery and health as well. We have a family-friendly earth care series. So one is looking at pollinator diversity and bee lookalikes, which promises to be great, and another one on foraging. We have some on finding balance. So get moving, get fit. Another one that's talking about how Somali grocery stores have been used to communicate COVID. That's supposed to be COVID vaccines. And then I'm looking forward to this August 17th, where they're going to be talking about developmental affirmations, words that help for any age and every stage. So how do we support others? Finally, the last series that we have going is our No Place Like Home. And so looking at home energy, we have a book. Sam and I are inviting people to grab this book, Brave New Home, Our Future in Smarter, Simpler, Happier Housing. And we're going to get together 3 times to talk about that book. We're also going to be looking at enhancing safety, preventing pests, hoarding, housing for all, and rural housing. So we encourage folks to check those out. All right. I am not seeing any additional questions in the chat, but we thank you for participating. Oh, one more slide. Sorry. So we do invite you to participate